progressive policies have been obstructed by the council majority. One example is the plastic bag ban. Berkeley was proposed many years ago that we adopt a ban on single-use plastic bags. Unfortunately, the city council majority did not want to move ahead with that. And that it took the county stop waste authority to pass a county-wide ban for Berkeley to finally have a plastic bag ban, given the environmental effects. So mainstream progressive liberal policies, things that people in the community have brought forward, things that reflect our community's values, have been obstructed. And this isn't necessarily about personal attacks. Our votes and our public record, I think, is an indication of our values and what we're going to fight for. And I have consistently fought for progressive values. And I've gotten progressive policies passed. Some of the candidates for mayor have not done that. And so I think we need a leader that's going to reflect our community's values, and that's going to build consensus, bridge the divides that have gripped our city government for years, and actually ensure we have an effective public process. I'm committed to all those things.
You guys don't go to the Richmond City Council meeting. talk about personal attack.
Yeah.
Check that out sometime. Do you all want to chime in? I've one. Policing. Is it your opinion that the Berkeley Police Department, do they have the trust of the community, or is there a problem with Berkeley police and community relations? And does Berkeley need to do something to strengthen the bond between the police and the community, and to improve police accountability, and to change police practices in Berkeley? And let's start with we won't start with let's go back to Jesse.
Sure.
And then we'll just go down the line.
So I do think we have, compared to other jurisdictions, a good police force. We do not have the high levels of use of force problems as other cities in the Bay Area. But that being said, we do have some challenges. And I have been, along with Councilor Worthington, one of the strongest advocates for police oversight and accountability on the Berkeley City Council. Several years ago, in response to the Occupy movement and the police response to the protests in Oakland, I led an effort on the council to change our mutual aid policies and to change our policies on how our police respond to protests and civil disobedience. And I think those policies are a framework that could be a model for other jurisdictions. In 2014, in the wake of the Black Lives Matter protests, which I participated in, our police, one night, December 6th, responded to the protests, largely nonviolent protesters, with tear gas, with beating ministers, journalists, other people, and with what I think was excessive force. And I led the effort on the City Council to have our Police Review Commission investigate what happened and to change our practices so that we're not tear gassing protesters. We actually adopted a moratorium on the use of tear gas, over the shoulder baton strikes, and use of rubber bullets in demonstrations. We're still working on trying to improve those use of force policies, those crowd control policies, but I do think we'll move in a positive direction. We do have an issue with regard to racial profiling. I actually brought to the City Council the racial profiling policy, which we adopted and which the department has implemented, which has shown what we've known for quite some time, which is that there's a disproportionate of black and brown people being stopped by our police. And so the question now is, what are we going to do to address that? And I think we not only need to improve the relationship between police and communities of color, but we also need to really look deep down at the data and figure out which officers have been engaging in what I think are inequitable policing practices and address those issues so that we can prevent profiling happening in our community. Our police review system is 40 years old and does not reflect modern best practices, including the 21st century policing recommendations from President Obama's task force. We need to modify our civilian police review system to reflect 21st century best practices. Our police review system is not very effective. And so I'm committed to, as I know Councilor Worthington is, since he brought something to the council on this, to looking sort of at Oakland's model, at strengthening our police review commission so it is an effective tool for police accountability and oversight, I brought to the council the proposal for body-worn cameras, which we're now going to be implementing. In a variety of areas, I have led efforts to ensure that we have policing in our community that reflects our community's values. And we also have an issue where we actually don't have enough police for the growing population that we have in our community. And that has made it difficult for us to implement a real community policing model in our city. And that's an issue I want to address as well. Thank you.
Well, 35% of our police calls are to deal with mental health issues. I think it's, I think it's great that we train our police to understand, how to deal with all kinds of people. But I think our number one flaw is that we're sending police to do a health job of mental health. We should be sending mental health professionals, social workers, counselors. There's all kinds of people who get paid a lot less. They don't need a gun and they don't need such a high salary and high retirement as police get in order to deal with mental health issues. I think Asians and Latinos and African Americans are underrepresented in who gets hired, especially Asians and Latinos, drastically underrepresented in Berkeley in hiring. All three groups are underrepresented in who gets appointed compared to their percentage of the population. And certainly now that we have the data on traffic stops that's posted online, it's beautiful, we got the details. We have proof that what pretty much every young and old African American and Latino person in Berkeley who has said for decades, like, yes, we're middle class African Americans and we got stopped by the police for seemingly no reason. We have statistical proof that racial profiling is alive and well in the city of Berkeley. That's why I led the way to try to have reform. I figured during the time while Oakland's doing a ballot measure, it's the perfect time for Berkeley to do it. And yet, we had the tiny little improvements, we had the sort of moderate improvements, and we had like do what Oakland's doing. And the city council, they didn't even talk about it. It was on their agenda again and again and again and again, and they wouldn't talk about it. They're like, oh, we're gonna go home, we don't, and it's like, it's the next item. And if they'd stayed for half an hour, we could have seen, are any of these proposals ones that they're willing to move forward? Instead, we got nothing. And it's sort of, to me, that's symbolic of the majority of the council's unwillingness to address, just like it took them 12 years to get around to the minimum wage, we're not going to let it take 12 years to get to reforming this. We're going to go out and, if the city council doesn't do it, we're going to get signatures and put it on the ballot in Berkeley. So we will get something for the voters to vote on. It's just tragic that we didn't get it this year because of the certain people on the council's resistance to even talking about it, let alone solving the problem. But equally important to the need to reform the police accountability, which is woefully out of date, as Arreguin pointed out. We also have practical tools to have a more effective police department using technology. And I keep introducing proposals, and some of them get approved by the city council and some don't. But those proposals, if we implement them, we can use technology and social media to have our police department be far more effective at communicating with the public.
Thanks, so I think that sort of the police accountability and police practices definitely need to be looked at thoroughly. Police have historically been basically state-sanctioned actors of violence and perpetrators of racial segregation, and I don't think that's the sort of police force that Berkeley wants in the 21st century. So I think we need to systematically review, again, sort of what's the problem here? What do we want police to do? And then how can we best train and allocate our resources to accomplish that goal? So for example, we talked about mental health a little bit. Many police calls are directed to mental health services. We don't have enough trained mental health professionals on staff to really respond to calls. So we can reallocate some of those resources that are currently spent paying cops big salaries, carrying around guns all the time, and instead of focusing on mental health professionals, we can actually help people who are calling for help. Similarly, police beats need to be looked at. Right now, police beats were rearranged following the Great Recession, but now we have more property crime going up in the hills in North Berkeley, with only one officer around there. We just had a couple of recent shootings and tragic homicides in South Berkeley. probably not enough comes around there either. And so looking at, again, where the police are being allocated, because that's another factor when it comes to racial profiling. We see a lot of stop data from Berkeley that's, disproportionate people of color, but the cops are also disproportionately stationed in areas where they're disproportionate people of color. So, they're not going in the hills like for traffic violations because they're not out there in the first place. They're out in South and West Berkeley stopping people for whatever else they can stop people for. I think we do need more implicit and anti-bias training overall, because training people on implicit bias, they know their bias exists, doesn't actually get rid of the bias itself. We need to figure out ways to help them overcome their biases and see past, their first impressions. As far as some more police accountability, police reform things go, they're talking about for charter amendments or ballot initiatives. Berkeley is not Oakland. We do have better police force than Oakland does. We don't have a history of officer-involved shootings or openly racist cops. We have a much better police force that is more responsive to the community, and so I think it's appropriate not to do the same thing that Oakland's doing. We don't do the same thing there. We can see how it works out in Oakland before we really try to bring some of those same issues to Berkeley. And one last thing around technology, body cameras, are a great idea, but I think one of the really important policy questions that comes with that is who can view the footage afterwards. Is it restricted to internal use, or the journalists can see it? Is it open to the public? I think that's some of the biggest contentious issues around body cameras now. Once they're implemented, who actually gets to see the footage? So I don't know the answer to that, but I think that's something we should discuss.
So in regards to Police Review Commission reform, that item was brought before the council as a charter amendment. And I voted, or I don't think it ever came to a vote actually, I was opposed to putting it on the ballot as a charter amendment. Number one, it hadn't been reviewed by the Police Review Commission. Number two, it hadn't been reviewed by the police department itself. And number three, it was basically a Xerox of an Oakland proposal. And as Ben said, the situations are very different. So my suggestion for PRC reform would be that we tell the PRC that we want feedback from them as to the situation as it exists today versus when we passed the PRC enabling legislation 40 years ago. Secondly, I sat in on a seminar with about 15 officers on implicit bias, and I think every one of the officers that were there admitted to the fact that there is implicit bias in their own minds and with their fellow officers. I think the key is to follow up on that training with how do you deal with implicit bias. It's one thing to say, I have that bias. It's another thing to say, how am I going to act out in public, in my patrol car or whatever, in terms of dealing with it. I think it's clear that we do have racial profiling, and I think we need to look at why and under what circumstances, and is it concentrated amongst a small number of officers, or is it spread out through the entire department? I would also say that in terms of body cameras, I made sure that that money was in the budget to do the pilot program last June. And number two, I also, as part of my item, sponsored an increase in the authorized level of officers. Berkeley used to have 200 authorized police officers. We now have 166. So it's gone down rather dramatically in the last 2 decades, and we need to address that. I would agree with others that many of the issues that police officers get calls for are mental health crises, people who are in mental health crises on the street. And it needs to be addressed by professional people who are trained in dealing with mental health issues. And finally, to the original part of your question, I believe that in general, the Berkeley police are well supported by the population in Berkeley, and I would say that across all socioeconomic lines. I suspect, and I believe it's true, and I remember President Obama talking about this, that young black men in particular probably feel there's a target on their back, and not just from police, but probably from many other parts of society, and we need to deal with that. But I do think, in general, we have a very high bar in Berkeley to become a police officer. We hire, in fact, I don't think in the last 10 years we've hired anyone without a 4-year college degree. There's an intense screening that takes place. for a variety of reasons, being a police officer in this society today is not something that's generally sought after. When we've opened up application lists in past years, we get up to 2,000 applications. The last time we opened up the list for testing and interviews, we got 300 applications. So, we're gonna have to address that too. But just again, going back to PRC reform, I think we need to do it very deliberately and transparently, and I do not believe in putting it in the charter, because the only way then to change it is to go back to the voters and amend the charter yet again. Thanks.
We should probably wind up, but I want to first of all thank everyone for coming in. The rest of our board will be reviewing the video, and we'll be endorsing by next Tuesday, if not sooner. But I wanted to give everyone the opportunity, if they had a final thought or a final message that they wanted to share with us. And Kriss, we could start with you, if you'd like.
Well, just facts. Once again, the city attorney said that we need to do police accountability reform as charter. What do we do? The mild version proposed. He said he wanted to know what the PRC thought. Well, it was in the council agenda as a recommendation, a list of reforms that the PRC unanimously voted to recommend. So we don't need to find out what they want. They've already told us, and it was rejected by the city council. And the police and the city attorney says either the mild version by the PRC or the full version like Oakland, they both have to be, most of the language has to be done as a charter amendment. So I didn't throw it out there as a charter amendment because I want to do charter amendments. I like legislating, and getting it done quicker. But in terms of last sentences, I've got 20 years of accomplishing enormous amount of policy, negotiating a lot of compromises. I think the factionalism is far less now. I've proposed one simple solution to clear up half of the confusion of Tuesday nights by every time there's a major issue, put it on a separate night. There's no reason for all the department heads to come and sit through another department's 2 or 3 hour hearing. And if you have a big controversial thing, whether it's police reform or a land use issue or anything, homeless thing, put it on its own night. And then all those department heads would love this, because they don't have to sit through all this other stuff. The public would love it because they could come to the meeting. This is the topic I'm interested in. I'm going to go to this meeting. They don't have to wait for 3 hours. And then some of our public hearings start like at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and then most of the public has gone home. So I think that single reform will make Tuesday nights so much better. And I think it's, if we don't get a mayor who's willing to do it, I'm going to try to make a motion to have the city council make that reform, because it's so essential and so logical, common sense reform.
Thanks. Ben?
Sure. So we talked a lot about housing, minimum wage, policing, and stuff like that, and I guess we hear more about Tuesday night circuses. For anybody who's watched Parks and Rec, city council meetings in Berkeley make Parks and Rec look tame. But I don't think the solution is to have.
Not nearly as fun.
That's true though. Well, I don't know. Depends which side of the days you're on.
That's true.
I don't think the solution is to have more meetings though. I think the solution is to have more efficient and more effective meetings. The issue is not that everyone wants to speak. The issue is that there isn't an effective way to convey public responses and positions on issues to city council members effectively. So we don't need to sit there for longer listening where we speak long. We need a better way for them to input their information. And we can look at using technology to provide new ways to do that. Because I think having meetings with 20 minutes of public comment rather than 2 hours of public comment is a much better use of everyone's time, if we can get positions listed beforehand. Additionally, I think it's important to look at records as well. When it comes to making promises, not everyone keeps them, especially around bus rapid transit in 2010. There was an issue where that was not approved. It was brought back to the city council agenda, and then someone was going to change their vote, and they didn't change their vote. It was a mess. And that's part of the reason that we're still dealing with transit issues on the south side. City council just passed a plan, was it last week now, to address that going forward, but it's 6 years delayed because of different political groups having different influence. I'm running again on a platform of housing affordability, reinvesting in parks and infrastructure, and environmental sustainability, because I think that these are the people that have had a chance to do their work, and they haven't done quite enough on those issues. And I think we need some new ideas moving to the council to really tackle that and move forward. Again, for housing, we need more housing at all income levels, especially built around transit and non-automotive forms of transportation. For parks and infrastructure, we can do more to help pay down our deferred maintenance and also close the deficit. And for the environment, I'd like to look at climate change, expanding transit infrastructure. Yeah, I look forward to being mayor of Berkeley, hopefully. Thank you.
Thanks. Jesse.
Berkeley is at a crossroads. We are seeing more and more of our longtime residents, students, working families being pushed out of our city due to rising housing costs. I'm very concerned about the displacement that is happening in our community, which is honestly one of the reasons I'm running. And I think there's a very clear choice between the candidates as to, what will we fight for? Will we fight for housing that is affordable for people on all income levels, or will we see more division and displacement in our city? I will address the housing crisis. I've led on putting forward innovative solutions to address homelessness, which is a growing crisis not just in Berkeley but throughout the region. I want to work to develop regional solutions to address homelessness. We have huge issues of equity in our schools and community. We have one of the highest racial achievement gaps in the entire state of California. We have huge disparities on the basis of health, wealth, and jobs and housing opportunity. We really have two Berkeleys, and I'm running for mayor to be a mayor that will represent our entire community, bridge the divides that have really factionalized our council and our community, and ensure that everyone in our community has a fair shot. I also think we need to innovate, and we need to be bold. Berkeley has historically been a trailblazer on progressive initiatives, and we have fallen behind many other cities. I want Berkeley to be a leader again. I want Berkeley to innovate and to, Ben talked about the way improving our public meetings. As the chair of the council's open government subcommittee, we're now going to be implementing an online civic engagement platform for people to plug in and to engage in our public meetings, so that you don't have to come to a meeting, but you can be heard. We need to look at ways to make our meetings more efficient, and we need to have a mayor who will develop our public process with a foundation of respect for the council and the public. Somebody who has a track record of getting things done. I have one of the most effective track records on the council, and who is committed to our community's values. I will vote for policies on affordable housing, immigrant rights, raising the minimum wage. I will not abstain on those issues, so vote no. We need leaders that will fight for Berkeley values, that will be bold, that will be innovative, and that will move our community forward and unite our city to address the challenges. That is why I'm running for mayor, and I'd be honored to have your endorsement. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're all running for mayor for the same reasons, but I would just say, please look at my track record. You can see it online. I have, in terms of accomplishments, you look at Measure D and the money it's brought to the city, the soda tax, that's $1.5 million going to the health of the community. You look at the minimum wage, and we can argue about it till we're blue in the face, but I'm the one that finally brought the item to the council, no matter how many meetings it took. I do believe that housing and homelessness is a regional issue. I have working relationships and an endorsement from 5 different East Bay mayors, including Libby Schaff of Oakland. I believe that the council has focused on housing for the very poor for many years. I brought forth and introduced items to look at workforce housing. In other words, people who work in Berkeley should have an opportunity to live in Berkeley. I think that Berkeley is losing its diversity, and the main way, perhaps the only way we're going to maintain any kind of diversity is to have housing available for people of all income levels, not just the very poor and what is turning out to be the very rich. I think if you look at my record on housing, you'll see that I have moved housing forward with enormous community benefits coming back to the community. If you look at Herald Way with 10 new movie screens with $10.5 million going into the Housing Trust Fund with a project labor agreement that I insisted be incorporated in that project. If you look at the new hotel, where I insisted that a PLA be part of that project and that every hotel worker would be a union worker, I think I have the track record that demonstrates that I can move Berkeley forward in a very positive direction. Thanks for your time tonight.
Yeah, thank you all again. I know you're super busy.
That's an understatement.
We're gonna post the video.
Yep.
So the video will go up on the web, so you can share it with your constituents.
Okay, great.
We can send you a link